They said he had everything in his hands. He thought victory was his final prize. But little did he know my secret plan was already set in motion, waiting to destroy everything he stood for. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more powerful stories. The courtroom was buzzing with whispers, a low hum of gossip that clung to the walls like smoke. Every pair of eyes darted between me and him, Daniel, the man who thought he had finally cornered me. He sat across the aisle, smug, with that self-satisfied smirk carved deep into his face. His expensive suit screamed of arrogance, his posture radiated superiority, and his entourage of lawyers whispered among themselves as though the game was already won to everyone else. Daniel was the victor. He had painted himself as the man wronged, the innocent husband betrayed by a cold, calculating wife. His lies had woven themselves into a convincing narrative, and for weeks, the media had eaten it up like candy. Headlines called me manipulative, ruthless, heartless, painting me as the villain in a story I never agreed to play. But what no one knew, what Daniel didn't even dare to imagine, was that the very walls he believed supported him were built on cracks. Cracks I had created myself, brick by brick, lie by lie, until all it would take was one sharp push to make it all collapse. As the judge entered and the gavel struck, Daniel leaned back in his chair and whispered to his attorney, loud enough for me to catch, "She's finished." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. Instead, I let a small smile tug at the corner of my lips, because while Daniel thought today would be the day he'd end me, what he didn't realize was that it was the day I'd finally end him. Flashback 3 months earlier. Day I found out about Daniel's betrayal wasn't the day he filed for divorce. It wasn't even the day I saw him walking hand in hand with another woman in a restaurant, his laughter echoing in the dim light like a cruel melody. No, the real betrayal began long before that, when he stole something far more valuable than love, my trust, my years, my sacrifices. Daniel wasn't just my husband. He had been my partner in building the company that everyone admired today. Every late night, every risky investment, every sleepless morning, I had poured my soul into our dream. But somewhere along the way, Daniel had decided the dream was his alone. He rewrote the history of our company, painting himself as the mastermind, erasing me from the narrative like I was nothing more than a shadow. Investors saw him as the genius. Clients believed he was the reason for success, and me? He pushed me into the background, the supportive wife, the accessory to his brilliance. When I discovered his affair, I expected rage to consume me. But instead I felt clarity, because his mistress wasn't just any woman, she was an investor's daughter. A pawn Daniel believed would cement his power, tighten his grip on everything we had built. He thought aligning himself with her would secure his empire, leaving me discarded and humiliated. But that was Daniel's first mistake, underestimating me. As I watched him flaunt his false victory in court, I remembered the long nights I spent planning. Every document I had quietly copied, every email I had archived, every transaction I had tracked. Daniel had built his empire on deceit, and the first held the keys to prove it. And so, while the courtroom believed him to be the conqueror, I knew the truth. The real game had only just begun. The first time I hinted at my plan, it was subtle. Too subtle for Daniel to notice. We were still in the early stages of the divorce proceedings, with his lawyers pushing for aggressive settlements. He wanted the house, the company shares, even the vacation property we'd bought together in Italy. To him, I was supposed to cower, sign papers, and vanish. But idea in single quotes T. Instead, I sat quietly in the meetings, hands folded, eyes calm. And every now and then, when Daniel thought he had cornered me, I would slide a piece of paper across the table, a financial discrepancy here, an overlooked email there. Just fragments, nothing explosive enough to trigger alarm. His lawyers would exchange nervous glances, whispering furiously, and Daniel would brush it off with a wave of his hand. He was confident, too confident, and that was the beauty of it. He didn't realize that with every scrap I revealed, I was testing the waters, watching how deep his corruption ran, and how much his own team knew or didn't know at night. I would return to my apartment, the walls bare, the silence heavy. I'd pour myself a glass of wine and open my laptop. My screen would light up with folders, thousands of files meticulously labeled. Hidden bank transfers, offshore accounts, contracts altered in his favor. Proof that Daniel wasn't just unfaithful in marriage, he was unfaithful in business, too, but the most damning evidence wasn't the money. It was the mistress herself. Her father, the investor, had no idea his daughter was being used as Daniel's pawn. And the more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Daniel's entire empire was built on a web so tangled. It was only a matter of time before it strangled him, and I would be the one to pull the thread. The day of the investors' gala was when I made my first real move. I walked into the glittering ballroom in a sleek black dress, the kind that turned heads without trying. My presence wasn't just about appearance, it was about sending a message. Daniel thought he'd humiliate me, that I'd be too broken to show my face in public. But there I was, poised, unshaken, and ready. I saw him across the room, his arm draped around her shoulders. She was young, radiant, and blissfully unaware that her smile was part of a larger betrayal. Daniel's eyes flickered when he noticed me, just for a second, but long enough for me to know. I had unsettled him. I didn't approach. Not yet. Instead, I mingled, greeting investors, laughing softly at their jokes, reminding them that I still existed. And when the moment was right, I found her father. "Mr. Turner," I said warmly, shaking his hand. "It's been a while," he beamed at me, clearly pleased. "Ah, yes. Daniel's wife." "I've been meaning to ex-wife," I corrected gently, my smile unwavering, "but still very much involved in the company's foundation. After all, I built it with him." His expression shifted just slightly. Confusion, curiosity, a flicker of unease. That was all I needed. I didn't stay long. Just long enough to plant a seed of doubt, to remind him that Daniel's story wasn't the only one. And as I left the gala, I glanced back at Daniel. His smirk was gone, replaced with a tightened jaw. Eyes locked on me like I had become his greatest threat. He was right, because while he thought this was a battle of pride, I was waging a war of strategy, and every move I made was leading him exactly where I wanted him, to the edge of his own downfall. The cracks widened faster than Daniel could plaster them over. A week after the gala, whispers began circulating through the company. Investors suddenly grew cautious, questioning Daniel's decisions. Employees who once worshipped him now exchanged uneasy glances in hallways. Something had shifted, and Daniel could sense it. He stormed into my attorney's office one morning, unannounced. His eyes burned with fury as he slammed a stack of papers on the desk. "You think you're clever?" he hissed, leaning over me. "Parading around like you're still relevant? Let me make this clear, you're nothing without me." I didn't flinch. Instead, I calmly adjusted my blazer, meeting his gaze. "And yet," I said softly, "your investors don't seem to agree. They've been calling me, curious about the details you conveniently left out." For the first time, I saw it. Not arrogance, not confidence, but a flicker of fear in his eyes. He scoffed, straightening his suit. "This is my empire, and you'll regret trying to take it down." But he was wrong. It wasn't just his empire, it had always been ours. And I had the receipts to prove it. That night, I sent an anonymous packet to Mr. Turner, the mistress's father. Inside were documents, falsified ledgers, hidden offshore transfers, signatures forged to cover Daniel's tracks. I didn't attach a name, but I knew he would recognize the truth when he saw it. The next day, Daniel's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. His once loyal allies were suddenly silent. Meetings were canceled. Deals were delayed. The fortress he had built was crumbling, and he didn't even know where the cracks were coming from. And as I watched from the shadows, I realized something important. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. For me, for everyone he had stepped on, and for the empire he had built on lies. Daniel tried to fight back. He called emergency board meetings, attempted to reassure investors, and even flew out to Europe to patch up deals. But everywhere he went, doors began to close. Trust was a currency, and his account was overdrawn. Meanwhile, I quietly positioned myself back into the narrative. I began meeting with investors not as his ex-wife, but as the co-founder they had overlooked. I reminded them of the nights I stayed up drafting proposals, the months I negotiated contracts, the sacrifices I made so Daniel could play the part of the golden CEO. They listened. They nodded. And most importantly, they began to believe me. The turning point came during a shareholder meeting. Daniel stood at the podium, his voice confident but his hands restless. He presented charts, projections, promises of stability. But the room was heavy with suspicion. Then Mr. Turner stood. "Daniel," he said firmly, his voice carrying across the room, "before you go any further, would you care to explain these?" He held up a folder, the very documents I had leaked. Gasps rippled through the room. Daniel's face strained of color. "This is a misunderstanding," Daniel stammered. But the room wasn't buying it. For the first time, his words didn't carry weight. His charm had evaporated. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My silence was louder than any accusation, and as Daniel stumbled through excuses, I realized the game had shifted completely. He thought I was playing defense, surviving his blows. But in reality, I had seized control of the board. Daniel was no longer the hunter. He was the prey. The aftermath of the shareholder meeting rippled through the company like a storm. Daniel didn't leave the building right away. He stormed back into his office, slamming the doors so hard that the glass rattled. His assistant hovered outside nervously, unsure whether to knock or run. Inside, Daniel paced like a caged animal, cursing under his breath. Meanwhile, in the very same building, I sat with 3 of the largest investors, sipping tea as if nothing had happened. They leaned forward, listening intently as I laid out a clear plan: stabilize the company, rebuild trust, and guide it into a future without Daniel's reckless leadership. "Why should we believe you can do what he couldn't?" One of them asked, his voice sharp but curious. I smiled. "Because I already did." Daniel just took the credit. The room went quiet. They knew the truth now. That evening, word spread like wildfire. Daniel had been cornered. He might still have the title, but the throne beneath him was crumbling. He tried everything: media interviews, public statements, desperate phone calls. But every time he spoke, it only drew more attention to the documents. The lies, the betrayal. Night, I would catch my reflection in the mirror and almost not recognize myself. I wasn't the broken woman he left behind. I was sharper, stronger, calmer. And Daniel? He was unraveling, but there was still one card. I hadn't played yet, one secret plan that would guarantee his downfall. The secret wasn't just about financial fraud, buried deep in old files. I found something far more dangerous: evidence of a deal. Daniel had struck with a competitor, a deal that betrayed not just investors, but employees too. He had secretly outsourced a critical project overseas, pocketing millions while claiming it was company innovation. I sat on the evidence for weeks, waiting for the right moment. And then it came, the annual press conference. Cameras, journalists, flashing lights, all eyes on Daniel as he tried to spin his version of the truth. He strutted onto the stage, forced smile plastered on his face. Acting as though nothing was wrong, he began with charm. painting the company's struggles as temporary hurdles. But just as he relaxed into his speech, I stepped out from the side of the stage. The room froze. Daniel's eyes widened. "What are you doing here?" he whispered, the microphone catching his words and projecting them to the entire hall. I turned to the audience, calm, steady, my voice carried without effort. "There's something you all deserve to know." The room buzzed. Journalists raised their cameras higher. Investors leaned forward, and then I revealed it, the documents, the proof, the betrayal that Daniel thought would stay buried forever. Each page landed like a dagger, and with every word I spoke, Daniel's carefully built image collapsed in real time. By the end, the hall was silent. Daniel stood frozen, sweat beading on his forehead, his jaw slack. He had no defense left. I looked at him one last time. "You thought you won, Daniel, but you never saw the real game." The cameras captured every second, and I knew in that moment his empire was finished. The fallout was immediate. By the next morning, Daniel's face was plastered across every newspaper and online headline. CEO exposed for betrayal. Investor confidence crumbles. Secret deals uncovered. Employees walked through the office with hushed whispers, some angry, others relieved. Many of them looked at me with nods of quiet gratitude because they finally understood who had really been standing for them all. Daniel, meanwhile, tried to fight back. He called emergency board meetings, threatened lawsuits, even begged certain allies for support. But his voice was no longer commanding. It was desperate, panicked, and shaky. I received an email that morning from one of his closest advisors. "It's over." He knows it. He just doesn't know how to accept it. When I saw him later that week, he looked like a ghost of himself, tired eyes, hollow cheeks, his arrogance drained away. He muttered as he passed me in the hallway, You ruined me." I didn't respond, because the truth was I hadn't ruined him. His greed, his lies, his betrayal, they had done the job long before I showed the world the proof. And yet, deep down, I felt no joy in his collapse. What I felt was freedom, but Daniel's final blow was still to come because the board had scheduled one last meeting where his future as CEO would be decided. The boardroom was silent as Daniel entered. His shoulders slumped, no trace of the confident man who once ruled over everyone. I sat across the long table, my hands calm, my documents neatly stacked, my heart steady. The chairman cleared his throat. "After reviewing all evidence and in light of recent events, we have reached a unanimous decision." Daniel's eyes flicked toward me, as if hoping for a miracle. "You are hereby removed as CEO, effective immediately." The words echoed like a verdict. Daniel's face fell, his lips trembling as though he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. The room had already moved past him. And then the chairman turned to me. "We believe you are the best person to lead this company forward." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. All the years of betrayal, humiliation, and pain had led to this one quiet moment of justice. Daniel stood, his fists clenched, his pride shattered. He leaned toward me, his voice a bitter whisper. "Enjoy it while it lasts. You'll never really win." I met his eyes, unflinching. "I already have." He left the room, his footsteps heavy, his empire gone. The board applauded lightly, the weight of change settling in. And as I looked around, I knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming what had been stolen, my dignity, my truth, my power. Daniel thought he won. But in the end, it was my secret plan that crushed him, and it was me who walked away victorious. The story was over. The pain was behind me, and the future finally belonged to me.